Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, welcome to part 2 of starting your family tree. Thursday I did part 1 at the Maryville
Oh,
Library,
you did?
and I had no idea how many were going to come. 28 showed up.
Really?
Which was
Wow.
a large number. That made me a little nervous because you can't really answer many questions.
Sure.
And but it went well. I had to leave after an hour to come back here to judge the history fair. So I had an excuse to kind of end it early, or end it on time, I should say. And but it was a good group. There were a few questions, but they seemed to, appreciate
Mostly
what.
beginners?
More so than here,
Okay.
I think there was really only one true beginner
Okay.
last Saturday,
Yeah.
and many of you are kind of more advanced
Yeah.
than that person was. What I was going to do, depending on who was, I know 2 of our group from last Saturday said that they would not be able to
Right.
come. They had some other commitments. So I was going to spend some time kind of reviewing what we did part 1, but I really don't think I need to unless you have a question. Did you have a question from?
I didn't.
No,
No?
I'm
Okay.
good.
All right, well, beginning with part 2, I've handed out the outline, and we're going to follow that. Basically, what we're going to do in this session is look at 2 of the major genealogical sites on the computer, on the internet, that are the most helpful. And the reason why they are, there's probably, and more are being added all the time. They are the most helpful because, number one, they've been around the longest. And at the time, they really were focusing on, even pre-computer time, they were really focusing on getting the primary sources, the records from the counties, the LDS, Latter-day Saints, Family Search. They sent out teams after World War II, maybe even before that, going to Europe and going to, all the records in Europe are located in the hometown, in the town, not the county, not the national, but the hometown. That's why it's very hard to cross the pond, as they say, because if you don't know the person's hometown, it's looking for a needle in a haystack, literally. But they would go into town and they would microfilm all the records and then make copies and have them in their repository in Salt Lake City. And before the computer, what you would do is go to one of their family centers, which was connected to one of their churches. But you didn't have to be LDS. You were welcome. They didn't try to proselytize you. But you would go in there, you'd look up in their catalog for a census record or the county birth records of Dark County, Ohio, and then order the microfilm. And then you'd wait a week or so, and it would show up. And then they had microfilm readers. I don't know if you've ever used one.
Oh, yes.
But they're kind of fun, you're just moving this film back and forth looking for your information. None of it was indexed. Later on, they started, certain groups were indexing, which was helpful, but you tried to find the information. And then you were dealing with primary records, which is really what you always want to try to do.
Somebody. No. Not
Okay, yeah, if you hear somebody rattling the door, they're trying to, I can't unlock that door, I don't know how to do it, or I don't have the key or something. Their focus, Family Search, LDS, was to get the records. Along with it, they would also keep records of people's research, their family trees. Now that's definitely secondary records. You have to be very careful because some people are not really trained to do the scholarship. Any miller will do in a storm, kind of mentality. Sometimes they had girls who were 8 years old giving birth to children. Hi!
Hi, I'm sorry.
No, glad you came. We're just doing sort of a little summary
Okay.
of what we covered. And so you had to be really careful about their research. It was always worthwhile looking at, and sometimes they would lead you to the right records, but you had to be careful. And then the third thing that Family Search was very good at is they tried to digitalize their library, and they have the largest genealogical library in the United States. The second one is Allen County, Fort Wayne, Indiana. And they keep swapping stuff back, so they are really good at enlarging their capacity. So some of those books are digitalized. You can access them. Unfortunately, we got the florist. I don't know if he has to be.
Okay.
He should have a key.
What?
They should have
He
a
should
key.
have a key. Okay.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, they've got a key.
Oh, okay, thanks, sorry.
After 10 years, you kind of forget that. So the problem is that you'll run into a book that at least the title sounds really good. The Hots of Virginia, or the Hots that came from Germany. You go, oh, that's my book, and then it's copyrighted. Well, they won't let you look at the book.
Yes.
What they'll do is, well, there's several things you can do, but we'll skip on to the other thing. So those are the three main things that Family Search offers. The other really major, and they're free. That's a wonderful thing about it. You can put your family tree on FamilySearch.com. That's one of the first things they'll invite you to do, is put your family tree in. It's free, and you know that it's not going to get thrown away. You'll pass away. Your great-grandchildren one day wondering what their family history is, if they stumble across Family Search, if that's what it's called then, they'll find your work, and that's really what you want. You'd hate to spend 20 years on your genealogy and have it in nice cardboard boxes, and you pass away, and your son and daughter come to clean the house, and all that goes out the window, or in the dumpster. That would be kind of heart-wrenching, So you want your stuff to stick around. Today we're going to look at those two. Ancestry.com is every bit as good in records as Family Search. They have access to books too. I haven't run into the problem of copyright as much. I don't know if they sort of ignore it or what, or they just don't offer it as a thing to look at. But you have access to books that people have written. Might be even books where they collected primary source material and then published it that way, like a census index before censuses were
I haven't
indexed.
run into any issues.
Pardon me?
I haven't run into any issues.
Issues?
With copyright with Ancestry.
Oh,
I
okay.
was just thinking about it.
You run into it with Family Search
Right,
all the time,
right.
but they have a lot more, I think. I mean, I always go there first if I'm looking for a book.
Oh,
And then if I can't find it or it's copyrighted, then I try out some other places. Ancestry.com is a subscription, and you need to pay a certain amount for a length of time. So you can subscribe for a month, promising yourself you're going to just put 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You're just going to pound this stuff in, and then it would really be worth it if you could do it that way. And some people do that. Unfortunately, the reality of time is you can't do that. So, but you can do a month. You can do, I think,
6 months.
what?
You can do 6 months.
6 months a year.
A year. Usually I do 6 months at a time,
Mhm.
and then I lay off for a while.
Yeah,
And-
that's
Just out of curiosity, how much is 6 months? Like,
$99.
okay, so
But
it's
they'll
kind
run-
of crazy.
But they'll run specials every now and then,
Okay,
Yeah.
and you can get it for $79.
okay,
And that's for US only.
okay.
You can also get a world subscription,
yeah.
which is much more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, if you'll turn to your handout, we'll kind of follow along here. What I tried to do was do a little copy and paste here. So if you go to familysearch.org, there's the address at the top. It's free. If you go to the Munster Library and look up, I think his name's Mike, that was in the
Yes.
first sheet, and ask Mike, show me how to use a computer. He'll do that. Tell him, thank you. Now, can you show me how to access Ancestry.com? It's free through the library, but it's only US. Okay, now that's a big savings. That's nothing to sneeze at. And especially if you're kind of going, gee, I don't know if I want to spend $100 for a 6-month subscription. I just don't know if it's going to work out. But give it a try. It's free. And I guarantee you, if you're really kind of serious about doing this, if you go, I enjoy doing this. This is a lot of fun. And especially when you talk to your relatives who don't know anything about this, but they're somewhat interested. If they were really interested, they'd be doing it. And they're kind of impressed. Oh, I didn't know that. That kind of fuels the enjoyment. Before you know it, you're going to have a computer. You're going to be paying the subscription because it's a lot easier at home.
Sure.
Especially if you have to, look back on some records. You can't carry everything into the library, so you go to your file cabinet and find that record. I just did that yesterday. I'm writing up a paper as to which Christopher Stumpf is our Christopher Stumpf. There's 2 of them, and so I had to do some background information. I wrote a letter to North Dakota Department of Health that had the birth records, and in 1976, and I was sure I still had it. I found it within 2 minutes, because I had it organized and I knew where to find it. So Family Search, it's a great place to start. When you get online, you do have to register, and all you have to do is give them your name and I think your email address, and that's it.
You have to create a password.
Yeah, and those pesky passwords. I hate passwords. with a passion.
We've got 5 pages that I update all the time with all the passwords.
The old reliable
For
pencil and
everything.
paper, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, you do that, and even if you forget your password, it's real easy to access it. Once you get past that, this is generally the first screen you're going to see, and that is, you see the address at the top, www.familysearch.org. By the way, if I'm being simplification here, if you're saying, you know, we know all this stuff, let me know so I don't have to, you know, bore you with that. The next line down is your typical bar that you have, and then you have the family search bar. The first place you're probably going to start with is hit family tree. You get this drop down window. It has overview. That's worth reading because it tells you all the things that family search can do. The next one is tree, and that's that one you want to hit so you can start your family tree. And then you'll see this drop box is not the full extent of what it has, but it's a start. Okay, turn to our next page. Now the nice thing about Family Search and Ancestry.com is when you enter a family tree and you start adding to it, in other words, you've got a great-grandparent, you know the name, but you don't, maybe you know the year of their birth and they were born in Illinois, and that's all you know. Okay, after you put that into your family tree, you know, you go about your business, you sleep at night, you take the kids out to the zoo or whatever. Next time you check in, Family Search and Ancestry.com have been working to find who that great-grandparent is based on just the information that you gave it, the name and the state where they were born. And when you come back, you'll get a hint. Ancestry is very good about the hint. It's like a green leaf. Yeah. Family Search will send you an email
Yep.
and notify you. We found the following. So you go to that screen and they'll give you a whole set of choices. Every George Smith in Illinois, you know, will be listed. And so then you do the searches. Yeah.
I just had a question about that. Say you are not sure. Like you think your grandparent was born in like 1904 or 1903. Would it be better just to leave it out than to guess or put it in?
In most cases, they'll give you a between date.
Oh, okay.
So you put in 1900 to 1910.
Okay.
That'll narrow it down.
Okay.
Hopefully. Sometimes you get somebody from 1700 and go, what? Obviously, I'm not looking for that, but you know that they're just trying to be helpful. So then, as you are adding these things, and you get these hints, this work that's being done, and you kind of go, yeah, that's the person, and of course you're basing it on information that you have found already. Okay, so maybe the name of that great-grandfather is listed as one of the parents of your great-grandfather on a birth certificate. Okay, that's how you know the name. You didn't get it from the family, they forgot. So you got the name, and a lot of times it will also state what state they were born in. You know, some information there that you can begin to use to, you know, to sift out what is not yours and what you want. Okay, as you're going along, now this is a typical ancestry chart just like you've been working on. And as you then zero in on that person, you'll have the parents on as part of the, you know, who their parents were, who they married, and then children. And sometimes people make the mistake of saying, well, I'm not interested in the aunts and uncles and cousins and poo-poops like that. I'm just interested in a straight line. Well, okay, you know, you can do that, but I'll guarantee you, you will come back and say, you know, I need to get the children in there. Because they sometimes are the hint to any movement in the family, or if you're comparing records, like if you go to a census record where you have a George Smith and the wife's first name is Marguerite, well, there's tons of those around. Okay, that looks all right, but then the children are different from the ones that you have. Well, that's a good tip off that I think you got the wrong George. You know, if they all agree, especially in name and eldest to youngest and date of birth or how old they were at that time of the census, then, you know, in other words, the coincidences start narrowing down to, no, this is the person. So that's why the children are very important. Okay, in the middle of that, page 2, FamilySearch.org has a lot of family trees done by their members over the years. There can be some confusing lookalikes. Okay, so here's an example. My great-grandfather was William Henry Stump with no F. That was a treat. And so here you got date of birth, October 1859. You got another one that was born in 1866. Well, it's not the same date, but it's sort of in the neighborhood. Okay, now which one is mine and which one isn't mine? So you start looking at all the information. So you have a marriage date, again, kind of close, and then relationships, who the parents were. Maybe you don't know the parents, but maybe you know the spouse. Okay, you know the spouse was Mary Beach Walton as opposed to Mary Christina Smilker. Okay, so it's the first one that's the one that's yours because there's more agreement there than not. But I put that as an example of saying even a rather uncommon last name, you will find people with that same last name around, and it can be confusing.
So this bottom guy's not yours?
The bottom guy is not, he's a distant relative.
I was gonna say, he's still Dark County, you guys was
Yeah,
related
yeah.
at all.
He's a distant relative. You have to go about 2 or 3 generations back to find a common ancestor, but he's not the one I'm looking for. If you click on the person, William Henry Stump, you will get more individual information, including sources. For example, okay, page 3. Now this is still Family Search. Okay, if you hit the button for the sources, right? Sources. Right? You will get a listing of sources that other people who have done the family tree and included this person in their family tree and took the time to post the sources, then you will have this list of sources. So and that's really the first thing you really want to zero in on to help you determine, is this somebody's figment of their imagination, or is this really backed up by solid scholarship? Okay, well, this William Henry has 11 sources. That looks good. There's 6 sources for his birth. Okay. No sources for his death. In fact, we don't know what happened to him.
Really? And
Which baffles me because
especially this late in the 1800s.
Exactly. I've gone through every state of the Union in their death records. I cannot find him. There's one person in California who could be, especially if he died and nobody knew anything about him other than his name. They say he was born in Germany. Well, he wasn't born in Germany, but somebody might have said, well, you know, his name was Stump, you know, sounds German, so we'll just put he was born in Germany. That's one of the things you got to be careful about, even with primary records. It depends on who gave the information, and that is always provided in the later dated death records. You want to look at who provided this information. It should be a relative. If it was a next door neighbor, well,
I've had that before.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so because this is a family tree, the sources are our first interest. Why? We want to know the trustworthiness of the information. When I look at a family tree and I start finding obvious boo-boos, then I become very leery about anything that this family tree has. I'm going to verify, because it's obvious this person doesn't really know what they're doing. Okay, so I go down through the 11 sources that are available. First one, William H. Stump, his household, in a household of George Stump. 1860 census. Remember, he was born in, or they think 1859, so he would have been 1 year old. And census records are they're one of the cornerstones of your work. You need to check all the census records. That doesn't mean that they're always true blue, but they are a once in a 10-year snapshot of your ancestor, 1860, 1870, 1880. The only one that is not available is 1890. Some very efficient government official threw everything out because he didn't think he needed them.
No.
Really?
Yeah.
It drives me crazy.
But
Because
there's ways of finding the information through other sources like city directories and other things like that.
Sometimes tax records.
Yeah, but it's still not the best.
Well, he probably got promoted.
Probably. Yeah.
But you find this a lot where you're missing records. Military records.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of military records were kept down in St. Louis, and they had a fire in 1973.
Yeah.
Destroyed 60 to 80% of 16 to 18 million records
You're talking about in St. Louis?
in St.
Yeah,
Louis.
Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis, they had this
Yeah.
fire, and my father's records were in there,
One of
and
my
they were lost.
One of my grandfathers. Yeah.
Fortunately, my dad photocopied or photostated at that time, photostated everything, and I got it, so I have his complete records. I didn't need that, but I did write to them just in case
Yeah.
they still had it, and just fortifies what you've got. So this William H. Stump, Dark County, Ohio. The 1860 census listed the head of the family, could be a male or female. If it was a female, it's probably because the dad was gone or died. And then the children, generally in order of oldest to youngest, although not always, but generally speaking, it was that way. And it is inferred that these were the children of the head of the family up to 1880. And now in 1880, there was an extra column added asking for the relationship. So head of the house, Mildred, wife, George, son, Mildred, daughter, all the way down. So there was no surprises. Once in a while, a mother-in-law moved in, and she would almost always be at the bottom of the list and identified as mother-in-law. Before 1880, if you saw that, an older person with the same last name, or even the name of the maiden name of the wife, but she was at the bottom, you could almost bet that first of all, it's a relation, probably a mother-in-law, but you'd have to check that out. You'd have to research that. But sometimes that was the tip. That was the tip that I could find other family members. Okay, and so here's a typical 1860 census. And again, the idea, the census gives you a skeleton of the person You know, when they were born, where they were living, not when they died. If they died, they wouldn't be on the census. But what you want to do is get additional information to make them more living. So, well, we know George was a farmer. Well, so was a lot of Americans in the 1860s, but at least you knew he was a farmer. He had a position. The next two columns, real estate and personal estate. Real estate is blank, so it meant he probably didn't own any land. If you are really interested, then what you do is you look up land records in the county that they are living, most likely. Sometimes people own real estate outside of their county for whatever reason it was, and there's other ways of finding it. Personal real estate or personal estate was what his horse, his house, well, no, the house would be real estate. Horse, clocks, clothing, farm implements, blah, 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 you know, that was his personal estate. $130, that was his estimate. And it was always the estimate of the person who's being. So again, you don't take this as biblical truth. They could have been exaggerating or undervaluing what they had, depending on what the taxes were at that time. Birthplace, you got a lot of dittos here, so you got to go way up till you finally hit a state, but it is Ohio. And then marriage. Did they attend school? Andrew attended school. The other kids haven't attended school. Well, the next oldest is 6 years old. You wouldn't expect them in school. And there was a place for cannot read. So George couldn't read, but his wife could. And the Andrew, who was 9 years old, attending school, doesn't mark he can read. I would assume you spent 3 years in school, you should be able to read something. And then other things like condition, sometimes they would write blind or something like that. Okay, I'm not going to drag you through every one of the other 10, but that gives you a sampling. This is how, when you see 11 sources and you break it out, that's how they're listed. And what's really great about this is you can follow a person as they grew up. William Henry was only 1 year old in 1860. The 1870 census shows he's living with his stepfather in 1870 in Vandalia, Illinois. So there was a breakup in the marriage someplace, and then you do research. You write to the county. That's why I always suggest make sure you put the county down. You can write to the county and just say, I'm doing family research. I am led to believe that from census records that a William or a George Stump lived in Darke County. In the 1860 census, he's identified, but in the 1870 census, his wife is now living in Illinois and married to another person. We want to know, did he die in Darke County, or was there a divorce or a separation or something? And those people generally will look this stuff up. You can also send emails. I'm used to writing because I like to have the written reply to stick in a file folder, but you can do that with emails. So, as proof of, and a way to go back and make sure you understood what they wrote.
Now, Pastor, there's usually a cost involved in that of some type.
Costs can vary. I assume that when I'm writing to a government official, there will be no costs. But
Usually
if there is, they'll let you know.
Yeah, they'll tell you.
Back when I was doing it before the computer, family research was spotty at best. There wasn't that many. Now there's a lot more people doing it. So, either need more time or more staff, and then they're going to charge you. I would, can I help you? Oh, you're just listening? Would you like a?
I was listening for a minute.
Okay. I would, when I would write, I would always put a self-addressed stamped envelope for their reply. That sort of shamed them into replying, and sort of got a little bit more of a commitment from them. Otherwise, they'd go, it's going to cost me to reply, and toss it away. But that's what you do. You go on the county level and ask those kind of questions. And in fact, by 1870, they had been divorced. He dies a few years later, and she does remarry for the third time to a John Ward, which was very interesting. Apparently, he got fed up with her too. She divorced her. Apparently she was quite a pistol.
What was her name? I can't read it.
Her name was Mary Ann.
Oh, Mary.
Mary Ann, and Mary Ann Smith. When I first saw that, I went, "Oh, the last thing you want is a Smith," because there's so many of them. But she was fairly easy to track down. Sort of like a tornado going through town. It's easy to track somebody. So I tracked her through her. She was first married to a Peters, and he died. And then she married George Stump, my great-great-grandfather, and then they got divorced. And then she married John Warden, and he couldn't put up with her and divorced her. And then finally she died. And I'm surprised I was able to track her down that way. But my interest was in William Henry, which is the youngest child in the 1860 census. So he was living in Illinois with his stepfather and mother. The next census is 1880, and I find him in Missouri, and he is living with his brother, A. Jackson Stump. Now see, if I didn't know his brother from the 1860 census, I would have been tempted to just said, oh, there's no relationship here, and proceeded to walk in darkness. But here I knew immediately, oh, that's his brother. And so he was living with his brother. The 1890 census doesn't exist. Next time we run into him is when he gets married. Find him in county marriages in Illinois. We had some family information of where they got married, who he married, so that was fairly easy to find. But Family Search and Ancestry.com had figured out the connection, so that was very helpful. And then names are sometimes either misspelled. If you look at number 6, 1884, instead of William Henry Stump, it's N.H. Stump. Either that is a scribal error, or the person who was reading the record entered it into the computer as an N, not an H. And sometimes the handwriting was sometimes difficult. Summer census, they took the census not the same time every year, every 10 years. So summer censuses are almost always much better than the other months because teachers were pressed into service and they had nice handwriting. But sometimes you get somebody with really bad handwriting.
Oh, yeah.
And Ancestry really helps because when you get the picture of the census record and you're looking at it and you go, is that an N or an H or what is it? You put the cursor on the letter and it will then tell you what the letter is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which is very helpful.
Yeah, if you put it on the name, they'll spell out the name for you.
Wow.
They're real good.
That's nice.
But sometimes it's still worth noting in your notes that this could be an H. This could be an N, just in case. Of course, by now, we know that it is W.H. William Henry. In 1887, his name pops up when his daughter, Leslie May Stump, is christened. He shows up in the 1900 census as the head of the family, and so forth. I said I wasn't really going to do that, but it's fascinating. We didn't know that Leslie was married, and we find, I was looking for William Henry Stump, and this California marriage pops up, and he is the father of Leslie May Stump, who married Adelbert G. Cole, and that's the person that nobody knew she had married. But the marriage record is very precise, naming her father, her mother, which coincides with what we know, her date of birth, which we know, and it was all corroborated. Okay, first bullet on page 4, you may want to start with FamilySearch.org because it's free, and you can try it out with little commitment. They also have European microfilm records indexed but not complete. And that's, again, if you're crossing the pond and you're going back into the old country, that is really very worthwhile. Otherwise, if things are not indexed, that means you got to go and find the microfilm of the record that was microfilm, now digitalized, and you have to just patiently go down the page looking for the name that you're looking for. And if the pastor who wrote the church, and most records up to about mid-1800s, are all records kept by the church, whether Protestant or Roman Catholic. Only later did the government say, no, we're going to do this. Sometimes you think those pastors wrote with their elbow. It's just horrible, horrible handwriting. I even took a special class on German handwriting so that I could decipher this stuff. And some of it was just crazy, crazy, crazy. Like, if you see a capital letter and you can't figure it out, and it doesn't seem like it's a B or they gave 5 different capitals. It doesn't seem to be that, then it's probably a G. Oh my goodness, really? That's not exactly the precision I want, but that's what you got. Of course, those records are back in the 1700s, and you don't have to worry about that until you get into that area. The one drawback, both Family Search and Ancestry, is they don't tell you what they don't have. Which you go, well, so what? Well, if I'm searching for a family member from Darmstadt, Germany, which is a fairly large town, and I go to one of their sites, whether it's Family Tree or some other place, they will have certain records. They'll say, well, we got these records, baptismal, marriage, death records. Okay. They don't tell you what they don't have. They tell you what they have. So you look at it and say, well, I want to look for a record from 1700. Okay, I don't see that spread. They'll say baptismal records, 1870 to 1920. Okay, well, I'm not going to look in there because it's not in there. I don't see any 1870 record. But you don't know, have they not digitalized it yet? Or is it lost? Is it gone? It's not to be found. You don't know. They don't tell you, which drives you a little crazy. So sometimes you write and they'll say, oh yeah, it's on our schedule for 3 years from now. Oh, okay. I'll anxiously wait for that to happen. Or they'll say, no, the record is lost. Okay, well, it's lost, then I'm not going to waste my time looking for it someplace else. Okay, so to wrap up, Family Search Origin is organization is free, has lots of primary records, indexed. Index is really very helpful. If you submit your family tree, no matter how small, but more people is better. It will work 24 hours a day finding things for you. Many family trees of possible distant relatives that will help you find your people. So as other people are adding their family trees, there'll come a point where your great-great-great-grandfather is their great-great-uncle, clink, and family tree, family search and ancestry will alert you and say, ooh, we've got a connection here. And then it's up to you to track that down. A lot of time people will give their email addresses so you can write to them directly. I've never been terribly successful in that. I have a feeling a lot of people sort of get the bug about doing a family tree, and they sign up and they send in their 20-person family tree, and then they lose interest. And 2 years later, you write to them and they're going, I'm not interested, and they don't even answer. So.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate through Ancestry. I correspond with one of my dad's second cousins, who's my second cousin, twice removed, and one of his first cousins, who's still alive. And we correspond pretty regularly on Ancestry. And on Jan's side, I was able to correspond with a guy who gave me a ton of information.
Well, you've been very fortunate.
Very fortunate.
Very fortunate. That hasn't been my experience, but everybody's experience is different.
Right.
You know, you just go for it.
Yeah.
They answer. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to send them.
And by the way, even if they answer, verify. You know, don't just take it on face value. You have access to their library of materials, family histories, county histories. One drawback is copyrights. I've mentioned that. Okay. The other one is Ancestry.com. Here's a quote. Is Ancestry really worth it? There is no doubt about that. Any genealogist who is serious about their genealogy, who enjoys or requires the convenience of doing deep record research from their house, and wants to interact with other genealogists who are reaching the same lines, researching the same lines, a subscription to Ancestry.com is practically a must. So if you give it a whirl and you're really getting turned on, just even with family search, you can always go back to family search, you know, at home. It's always free. But I would invest in Ancestry.com. Do it 6 months. I like your approach because there are times where I just get fatigued, and I take a couple of months off, and I feel bad because I paid for that, and I'm not using it.
Well, I also find that within that 6 month period, if you're doing fairly steady research, at some point it runs out of hints and nothing new pops. So I like to take, time off and then go back on and say, there's something new.
Yeah. And that reinvigorates you
Yeah,
too.
it does.
So, even if you're not quite sure you want to spend that kind of money, go to the Munster Library, if that's the nearest one. Try their Ancestry.com. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have the convenience of doing it at home, but you can bring a few things with you and try it. And I will guarantee you, unless you get kind of tired of doing your family tree, you'll pretty soon say, I've got to have this. And even though it seems expensive, if you're doing it, it's like I was telling, I think Brian, it's like a gym membership. They're kind of expensive, but they're really expensive if you don't go. So Ancestry is expensive, but if you use it often, and I use it almost every day, if you use it often, it's very inexpensive, considering the amount of stuff that's available. I mean, there's not much that isn't available in Ancestry.com. And they're constantly working. That money that you're paying in is paying for further research. The areas that they're now really starting to digitalize are wills, probates. These are very important sources of genealogical stuff that just isn't available. 5 years ago, it was hardly available.
Right.
You'd have to go to the county seat and look up a will, and sometimes you didn't know unless you wrote a letter saying ahead of time, do you have George Smith's will? He died in 1878. Yes, we do. Oh, you could either tell him, well, make a photocopy and send it to me, or go there yourself. One word of caution, always ask, what's this going to cost? I sent a letter like that, and they said, yes, we have the will, and with the will is also the probate where they sold the property, okay? And so this person wrote back and says, yes, we have all that stuff, and if you'd like us to send it to you, let us know, and we'll send an invoice. Okay, it came, the invoice was $200 and some, which sounds, what, like, what are they're making money for their retirement, or what in the world? Well, there was almost 200 pages. They were just charging me $0.10 a page. And this person was humongously wealthy and had stocks and real estate and just stuff, it was, and everything was recorded, and unfortunately none of it came to me, but it was fascinating to just read through this stuff. And again, putting flesh on the bones, this was it. Okay, if you get, now with Ancestry, you can get just US access records, and I think you can get, that's the one that you can get at the library. What do you get? Well, you get US Discovery. There's a cost, but they run specials through the year, so you can get a special for that. Mother's Day, Father's Day. American records, you get US Ancestry records, family trees, Ancestry hints, which is really worth by itself. You create and edit your own family tree, which will never get lost unless the world comes to an end, I guess. Your ability to contact any Ancestry members. Then there's the next level, and this is separate. You don't have to get it, and I wouldn't get it until you're firmly across the pond, okay? And that's the World Explorer, okay? And it does cost quite a bit more money, but they've invested a lot into it, and it is indexed, so that's really worth its weight in gold. And there's all the different features that are available. And then you can combine the two. That's called All Access, so you get a bit of a break. And you can also add a couple of other little extras. At the bottom, we're on page 5, just above the first bullet, access to articles on newspaper. That should be newspapers with an S, not paper. Wait, it's either papers or paper single. There's another one called newspapers archive. But one of those, will type that in, you'll get it. Now, what Newspaper Archive does, and this is, again, this goes for putting the flesh on the bones. Newspaper Archive, what you do, it's very easy to use. You access their site. It is a subscription, so you have to pay. But you can get a break if you buy it with Ancestry.com. Okay, you get a break. So you type in George Stump correct spelling. The year span that you want. So, let's see, he was in, say, 1890 to 1920. Okay, year span. And then the state that the person was in. Or if you're really specific, you can be specific and put a town in. But I like a little wiggle room. Okay, so Illinois. Just like that, it will pop up all the newspaper articles that they have. It's not complete. I don't know if it'll ever be complete. There's so many
No, I
newspapers.
checked, there's a way to check,
Oh.
because I did it the other day. And you can check by state what papers they have.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
But it, like the other places, they don't say, well, we don't have the Chicago Tribune. You know, they don't say that.
Right.
The fact that they don't have it probably is a good dead giveaway.
Because they just had a free trial this past week.
Oh,
And so I was putting stuff in for my hometown, and nothing was popping up. So then I thought, I did some other searches. Well, they don't have the LaPorte Herald-Argus. What? It's one of the main papers in LaPorte County, and you don't have that? You know, I was kind of disappointed.
yeah. Well, what you do then is go to the other towns around.
Right.
Because newspapers were not shy about trying to steal other subscribers. So, and they knew what sells newspapers is having people's names in the newspapers. That's why some of the newspapers have the most inane articles, you know, like, you know, Aunt so-and-so visited so-and-so Thursday. You know, you go, who cares? But they knew that Aunt so-and-so wanted a copy of that newspaper, and the family that hosted her wanted a copy of that newspaper, and that's how you sell newspapers. Okay, a lot of real early newspapers were what we would call a one-page newspaper, printed on 4 sides. The one side was printed in a bigger city, and it had all the world news, U.S. news, whatever, on one side. The other side was blank. And they would send this to the local newspaper, who would then set the type to type up the blank page with all the local news. So if you have one of those kind of newspapers, you can just skim lightly over the first page. Maybe your uncle throttled your aunt, and that made the front page. But normal news was page 2 and 3. And then you can just scan looking for the thing. But newspapers.com indexes that stuff. So what pops up is that article. You don't have to search the whole thing, just that article. And again, I found out one relative was a William McKinley presidential fan, and he went around the county barnstorming for William McKinley. And they covered him, and so, wow, didn't know anything about that. Again, that adds flesh to the fact of who he was. All right.
Pastor, what's the Fold 3? What is that? A
Fold
website
3
as
is
well?
another little extra that you can subscribe to that's added to Ancestry. Fold 3 covers all military records.
Okay. Is it like its own independent site, or you have to get
Yes.
it?
There is it's an independent site, but you get a subscription break. I don't know how much, but
I'm not quite sure what they cost. They will also run free trials every now and then.
yeah. I have not subscribed to it. My family apparently only went into the military once every 100 years, so I never thought it was terribly worth it.
If you suspect that you have an ancestor or even like a great uncle or something like that who was in the Civil War, you can go to the National Park Service as a database of soldiers and sailors that served, both Confederate and union?
National Archives is another place to go
National
to.
Archives also.
And the nice thing about the National Archives is if you write and say, I want the service record of so-and-so, they will photocopy the whole thing, no charge, and send it to you.
And send it to
So
you, yeah.
I have a great-grandfather that served in the Civil War. I've got about a 40-page file of all his stuff. He lived long enough to apply for a pension. And so all these letters testifying, yes, he really did fight in the Civil War, from his commander to his captain to his sergeant. It's all fascinating stuff, and you can get it that way.
Yeah.
That's another source.
Yeah.
Okay. Ancestry.com offers DNA service.
Yes.
And as far as I know, Family Search does not. DNA, I'm still kind of a novice at it, so I'm working at it. At first I was not terribly impressed. I took a DNA test, sent it into Ancestry.com. Some months later, they sent a report saying I was 2% Hasidic Jew. I went,
Really?
never heard of that, and I had been working on my records for such a long time. No Jewish person was included on it. Wow. Well, I don't mind being a son of David, but this is quite a shock. 6 months later, they came out with the second report. See, every time they get more and more DNAs from through the land,
They
the
update.
better their analysis becomes. So this report, I was no longer Jewish.
Short-lived.
I think the first one, I showed ancestors from Spain, and it was like, no, I don't think so. And as they update it, they get closer and closer. And their research gets better.
So once you submit your DNA, they will send you, and they send you a report, they'll send further reports
Yes.
later
Oh, yes.
on,
Yeah.
unsolicited, just.
It's supposed to be
Yes.
lifelong.
Yeah.
I don't, maybe, but I still get reports. If you're going to go that route, don't stop at just Ancestry.com. That's where I'd start. But there's me and 23. There's about 3 or 4 other places.
Yeah, I've done one through Family DNA.
Okay. My Heritage is another one. Some of them specialize. My Heritage specializes in European connections. Now, my mother was French, so I'm very interested in seeing if I can find some distant French relatives. Some will track only the male line,
Yeah.
and some DNA tests will only track the female line, and I think Ancestry.com does both.
Right.
But if you're really serious, I know it's about $100 a pop.
Yeah.
My
Again,
son did it,
specials.
I don't know, he did, Justin did it,
Yeah.
which led us to Ancestry.com.
Now, just recently, as I said, I was never, I'm aware of it, I know I have to study it, I was just not real convinced, especially the last one that came out about four months ago, concluded I was 53% English heritage. This is news to my mother, who was French.
Mm-hmm.
She'd go, where did that 3% come from? What's going on here? Well, her father was from the northwestern part of France on the coast. So I'm suspecting.
Norman.
Yeah, Norman, or Brittany is the province. I suspect that there's some English influence that came in there someplace in ancestry in the past, but the more tests that you take, the better it's going to be in the long run. But a couple of weeks ago, I got a report back, and I checked it out with some other people. And there's a person, Brian Stump, no F, who we are connected DNA-wise, and he is a genealogical fanatic. He must work on this stuff full time. I mean, he's grinding this stuff out, and I always check. I don't take it on face value, but he's very accurate. He came up with, we're both connected to a 6th great-grandfather by the name of Christopher Stump, who came with his father, Johann Georg Stump, to America in 1710. They landed in New York. There's a wide belief that Christopher Stump was born in Darmstadt, Germany. That's along the Rhine River. Darmstadt, Germany. And when you look up a family tree of his, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. The year of his birth, the father's name, the mother's name we're not so sure about because the mother's name didn't seem to come. I think she died on the way to America, and then he remarried. A brother that supposedly came with him. Everything is absolutely perfect. And Brian thought, this was, well, actually, I thought he had backed away from it. He said, I think it needs further study. And so I thought, well, this is really great. But verify. So I went to the German records. The German records are available through a site called Archeon. It's like archon.de, which is Germany. And they have all the German church records. Okay. So I went there.
Do you have to pay for it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And this is run by the evangelical church. That's
Oh,
the Protestant church.
Right.
And they know what they got. And they charge you an arm and a leg for it. But it's the only game in town. I mean, some of those records are in Family Search,
Sure.
but not all of them.
Not all.
That's how I found out, hey, Family Search doesn't have all of the records, right? But it is worth it. It's like Ancestry.
Sure.
And so I looked it up and corroborated all the information that was on the family tree. And I went, well, must be the person. And I was more than happy to accept it. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to look at confirmation records. Now, he was born in 1700. He should have been confirmed before they left in 1709. Okay, they confirmed earlier. So I went to the confirmation records. He's not there. Well, that's kind of odd. All right, I'm going to look at death records. First of all, I looked up his birth record. He was baptized the 19th of July, 1700. He was born on the 18th, the day before. Okay, now it's not unusual to baptize the next day.
No.
We don't do it, but it was not
I
unusual.
found that out too, because my side was Catholic, my German, but they would baptize usually within 2 days.
Yeah. Or the next Sunday or whatever. So I translated it. I had enough German in school to be dangerous. Ich möchte ein Bier, bitte. That's my favorite phrase.
The most important line.
Yeah, I want a beer, thank you. So I translated it, and the translation just struck me kind of odd. Gave the father and the mother's name, the sponsor's name, which happened to be the grandfather. And I thought, oh, hey, this is great. Then it had a very odd phrase, and I had to really research that. But the phrase was, due to the sickliness in the house, not of the child, but in the house. He was baptized the next day. I thought, sick child, I understand. Sickliness in the house, I don't know what's going on. So then, that was the birth record. So then I went to the death records, and I find him. He died the next day. And the record was 20th of July, 1700. the name of the child, which corresponded with the birth record, the name of the father and mother, which corresponded with the birth record, and it included his sponsor, which was a little unusual. They don't usually do that in a death record, but his grandfather, so everything matches perfectly, but he died the next day. And the literal translation was, and he went into silence the next day, which is really kind of, I was asking a German expert, and he said, well, it's a little colorful, but you know, sometimes they did that. So obviously, if he only lived 3 days, there was no way that 9 years later, he shows up in America. He's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So this can't be my great-great-grand. So I wrote letters to people who had put this on different sites, pointed that out to them. Boy, they were just really mad at me. They were just furious.
You
They
screwed
said,
up our
well,
entire
you got
tree."
the wrong material. I sent them photocopies. No, it's, okay, maybe he died, but then they had another child and called him Christopher.
And that does happen.
I have it.
Right.
It's rare.
It's rare.
It's
Okay.
rare, but it does happen. But we have the family tree. Every 2 years, like clockwork, they had a child.
Uh-huh.
Can you have a child between the two? Yeah, I suppose you could, but they probably didn't live. And so I went back digging. I did what I was told you should not do, and that is to go to each village in Germany and search the records. And I found out Stumpf is not that common of a name, and Christopher Stumpf is really rare. But I did find a Christopher Stumpf whose father was Johann George Stumpf. He was born in 1701, so only 1 year apart. And there's no, he and his family are in the town record, but not later. There's no death record, there's no, what happened to them? Well, they may have immigrated to America. I mean, it sort of fits, not quite as perfect as the other place, but, you know. Okay, we're going to meet next Saturday, if you haven't given up on me. What I'd like you to do is again, do some homework. Brian was really slaving away on his ancestry chart. He was doing a good job. I don't know what he's done. Did you?
I
what did you
got
do?
a binder. I
Good
got
for
a
you.
binder. That was about
Good
it.
for you.
So that's where I'm at.
Oh, you
But
got the binder.
That's it.
That's it. All right.
But
Do you want me to finish this?
Yes. Yeah, there's no prizes for being fast.
Okay.
Okay.